Well, hey, and welcome to the Simply Strategic Ministry podcast. We are excited here. I'm here with my friend Anthony Lucarini. Anthony is the student pastor at Low Country Community Church. And where are you at in South Carolina?
We are right next
All
to
right.
Hilton Head.
Well,
So if you know where Hilton Head is,
everybody
you know where
wants
we
to
are.
live at the beach, but the most impressive thing about him is that this man has triplets. And so if you think that you are tired in ministry, Anthony is more tired. Do I have that right, bro?
Oh, dude, you are so right. And luckily, my wife is a superhero.
There you go. There you go, man.
I
Well, we
appreciate it a
are.
little bit.
So if you are new to the podcast or you're new to joining in to the SSM community, we are a coaching company. And so we coach ministry leaders and coach nonprofit leaders. And our goal is that we help you grow your ministry through simple strategies and scalable systems. And so today is a live coaching podcast where we're just going to take an issue, because we all got issues, no matter what leader, whether you're a church planner or you're a student pastor, we all got problems, and it's really easy to see somebody else's problem. It's not always easy to see ours. And so we're just going to take a problem today and an area that needs to be kind of grown in and just talk about it. And I got a feeling if you're listening, you'll probably resonate with part of Anthony's ministry and maybe even be helped in growing as well. And I also want to let you know that if you are interested in coming on the podcast, no matter your ministry size, you don't have to have a mega church, or you might have a new student ministry of 8, 9 students. Like, we got a lot of different people who are watching from a lot of different places, and we just want to help people grow and help ministries grow, because when the next generation grows, when the church grows, everything's going to get better. And but with Anthony today, man, go ahead and tell us a little bit about your ministry. How long have you been there, and what's your church like, and what's your position as well?
Yeah, so I am the student pastor. I lead a team
There you go.
of, it's supposed to be 4 of us. We're trying to hire right now. So we do have a position open. If you guys are out there,
Who
part-time
doesn't
admin, want to move to the beach,
at
come
the
on down.
beach for this church? I mean, come on, apply today.
Right. Dude, it is perfect location. I said next to Hilton Head. It is. We're also 25 minutes from Savannah, 2 hours from Jacksonville, 4 hours from Charlotte, 4 hours from Atlanta. I mean, it is ideal location. Been here 7 years. And let's see, I was a middle school pastor for 2 years, kind of interim associate there for a minute. And I've been the lead guy for almost 3 years now. Church is incredible. It has such a rich history. Our lead pastor has been here for 25 years. He is like the most theologically sound man I've ever met. He's one of those guys that when you spend just like 5 minutes with him, you learn, you get better. Our staff is phenomenal, and it just keeps getting better with time. Man, what else? I love my job, love where I'm at.
On so do you oversee middle school and high school?
It's a ton of fun.
Yeah, nice. So you've said how many years did you say you've been full time at LCC? Okay, year 7. Here we go. So you're getting your 6th grade. This is your year, right? Like, this is you got your 6th graders graduating 12th grade. I just want to say, let me just commend you on that. I recently talked about, the tenure of a youth pastor being 18 months. And, there's a lot of external factors that can sometimes, contribute to that. But sometimes it's just you just don't have the perseverance to stick it out with your 6th graders through 12th grade. And, I just commend you on that, man. That's awesome. I know your community is blessed by that. Now tell me, how big is your student ministry? Are you in a big church, small church, medium-sized church? Tell us about that.
Yeah. Post-COVID, we see right around 2,000, sometimes a little over, sometimes a little less on a Sunday in person. And then we have a thriving online ministry. I don't know how you're supposed to measure that.
It's whatever the pastor wants it to be, nobody right?
Really knows, exactly.
Yeah, we don't need to get into that.
I won't tell you what our pastor wants it to be. No, I'm just kidding. But I think it's pretty accurate. Anyway, so thriving online ministry, student ministry. Again, this is always so hard to judge when you've got spring sports, which cuts your numbers in half and stuff like that. Core wise, we've got a couple 100 kids. When we have big events, they all will skip whatever it is to come out, and that's close to about 300, maybe a little over that. Average week to week is
Okay,
anywhere
cool.
between
So you're,
140 and 170.
that's kind of like the average large student ministry. When you've moved past you guys are right there,
Yeah.
and that's awesome. So this year, like I said, we help ministries, we help pastors and leaders grow their ministry. Now, I always like to make a caveat here, because anytime you say you help something grow, we all know, and I think as the community that I talk to understands, that we can do nothing outside of the Holy Spirit. We cannot grow anything. If we try to grow something, it's going to grow unhealthy.
Yeah.
It's going to be bad. But we do believe that there are ways to be faithful, right? Like, we want to be faithful, but there's also, okay, how do you be faithful? Well, you got to take care of people. You got to shepherd them well. And so when I say the word grow, it's like, yeah, we're going to help you grow, but what we're trying to do is help you how to be faithful in your context with people. So we help ministries grow through simple strategies and scalable systems. And so as you're thinking through growth, first off, what is your all's win? Like, what does growth look like for you? Because some people measure it in attendance, some people measure it through small group engagement, leader engagement, discipling, mentorship, relationships. What's kind of and I say the word grow, what does growth look like for you guys?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you hit all the different definitions in there. And of course, we all want to see all those happen. We all want to see our ministries grow through just numerically. We want to see attendance. We want to see disciples made. We want to see baptisms. We want to see salvations. We want to see more leaders. We want to see more leaders develop. So I think when I think of growth for our student ministry, what I really want to see, if we are doing well, and if we could grow in this one area, it is seeing more students enter our discipleship pathway. We call it co-groups. If you've heard of discipleship groups, that's our twist on that. Loco Youth is what we're called. So we got co-groups, and that is one leader leads 3 to 5 students through a Bible reading plan we've developed in-house, a 9-week curriculum on that. They read the same plan for a week, and then they meet in person on the 7th day and talk about the journals that they've kept the whole time. So we've got about a third of our kids in that right now, which is phenomenal. And that is a huge win for us. But the goal really is to get more kids discipled. Let's get them there, because if we can teach them how to read their Bibles, get in the Word.
Yeah, that's great. Absolutely. Okay. I mean, so much of discipleship is just simple, right? Like, we overcomplicate discipleship. Like, discipleship is just, let's read our Bibles together, let's pray together, and let's do it continually. Like, you're going to get discipled in that, in relationships. And so I love that. So just structurally, just to give our listeners some context, you guys meet Sunday nights, Wednesday nights, and then your loco groups, when are they meeting?
Yeah. So we meet on Wednesday nights. That's when our midweek gatherings are. And then co-groups exist throughout the week. They can be anytime. It's based on the leader, based on the covenant that is signed of, hey, we're meeting this day every week. A lot of those end up being Sunday mornings, because we're able to open up the building and just say, hey, go to my office, pick a spot. Here's a conference room.
Yeah, that's good. And so spread out. That's happening in 6th through 12th grade, or is that just high school? Like, what's the breakdown there?
Yes, we've got curriculum built out for middle school and high school. So the way we've built it is you've got 101 through 106. So a 6th grader in their first semester of 6th grade can start it, and they'll have a different curriculum plan all the way through middle school. And then we've got 201 through 205, which is once you hit high school, you can start in 201. Yeah. And yeah, it's Bible reading plans. And then 401, I believe, there's no leader anymore. So you're governing yourself, you're meeting, you're holding yourself accountable. 501 is you are leading That's awesome. A co-group.
So basically, just to kind of recap, is that, growth for you all, the big win, like, we all love, attendance, we love online engagement, we love all the things, okay? But the major win is when a student is in that loco group. That is for you, how that's on when that hits the scoreboard, that means you're winning the game, right?
Yeah, and I think we get one more little win when we get them to the co-group promotion, because we do promotion ceremonies at the end of every semester. So if they get in the group, that's a win. If we can get them to the promotion, where it's like, okay, you've met all the standards of graduating this semester, then awesome.
I love that. You've kind of created like a moment at the end to really, have you ever read Chip and Dan Heath's, or I messed up the name, Power of Moments? Okay. All right. Did that book inspire any of that thought? that
That's inspired a lot of my ministry. How do we
yeah,
make
yeah,
moments? How do we make those things
and
that
just
stick
tell
out?
everybody what's the power of that.
Oh, dude, that's when you make a moment that is a marker in somebody's mind that's going to stick out, that's going to take them back to that time, especially when you create positive moments. So my favorite part of that book, they talk about the peak ending
Okay.
theory. So youth pastors out there, this is really valuable. The peak is that moment that sticks out in your mind. Say you're throwing a big student event, you want to plan
Mhm.
the peak and you want that to be a high moment. Unfortunately, the peak could also be a low moment, and that could be if a kid got bullied that night, what are they going to remember? They're going to remember that moment. So let's build in X factors. Let's build in moments that they're going to remember, and then they're going to remember the ending. So the way that you leave, the last thing you experience, if it's boring and if it's lame, that's probably going to be their last thought on their mind when they're
Yeah.
leaving. So that's what their thought's going to be. So chipping in, he talk about that in the book. There's so many other little just tangible pieces
Yeah,
like that
yeah,
that
that's good.
translate
And I
directly
think
into ministry.
the word out there too is like if you're not intentional about creating moments for your students, then there is going to be a moment.
Yes.
And so I guess that's a good,
Yes.
and that could be a
Yes.
bad moment, of course. And we don't want that. And so I guess that then, okay, you got one third of your kids going to groups. So this kind of will switch into like, okay, how do we change that? Because obviously, who doesn't want everybody in the groups? So what do you feel like at the time we're recording this? We're right at the beginning of this student ministry school semester. We're right in the end of the summer. So what's kind of the goal for this year? How do you want that metric to kind of tick up?
Yeah, so the
Okay.
goal is to up the marketing. I think last year, even going
Uh-huh.
into casting vision for leaders, there was a lot of new changes we were adding in. And I really think as we cast vision to leaders this year, in the same way that I just told you, hey, here's the win for our ministry, I want to cast that to leaders to make sure that they
Mhm.
know, hey, push this to your kids. The win is getting them here, not necessarily to another big event, but let's get them into co-groups. Let's get them in the word. So that's my thought right now is
Okay,
cast the
so
vision to leaders and market it heavy
we
this
got
year.
vision, we got marketing and vision are kind of the same thing. One kind of starts in our head, one kind of gets on paper or in a digital format.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the engagement in your loco groups, where do you guys see where's the gaps? Who's really engaging? Who's not? Okay, all
That
right,
is
that
some
could be
data that I would
because
love to
that's always
capture. So
yeah,
that's a
no,
good little
that's
spot that
good
you just found in
because,
ministry. Thank you.
and that's just kind of how my brain works. I love to look at the data first and figure out,
Yeah.
where are we seeing it, and then try to think, okay, what's not working with this specific group. So, for example, if you were to turn back the data, and okay, just anecdotally, do you feel like you have more engagement in loco groups in middle school or high school?
I think
Okay.
part of it depends. I think there's different factors in there.
Okay.
We have some younger groups that are thriving, like some seventh grade groups that are doing really great. We've got some senior groups that
Yeah.
maybe they just graduated. They've done really well. Some upperclassmen groups that have
Oh,
done really
okay.
well.
Yeah,
I think the
that can
gap
make
might be in the
sense in a
middle.
transition moment because, early on, it's really, the sixth grade leader that's required. I always kind of, you probably understand this too. Like you can kind of get by with a kids ministry leader in sixth grade, because they're still like kids. And I don't know if you guys do fifth and sixth grade ministry or not, but like
Yeah.
we have there was a guy in my mind who he went from kids ministry to middle school ministry, but every year those kids got older, that leader had to take more and more of a back seat, and we had to bring alongside another leader beside them because it just kind of changes in those transitional years of the type of leader that's required. And some people just can't make that gap and make that jump really well without help. And so I think that would be a good place to start is like, let's figure out where the gaps are, and then let's really look at the faces in those groups because you might see that okay, the groups whose parents are connected have a higher, like who are connected to your church, have a higher engagement in loco groups, and that would make sense. But then I would also look at the factor of where is there any driving drop off here? So you might have middle school, and your middle school groups, you might be like, well, each group's a little bit different, but you might be able to see, okay, well, in the seventh grade group, that group is full of kids whose parents don't go to our church, which means they're going to be less likely to drive them to another night of the week. Versus the other eighth grade girls group might have a really high engagement of their parents. Therefore, it's not an issue. They're bought into the vision. Because what I'm trying to think through is like, okay, we're trying to get them from, I'm sure you've heard of it. And if you've heard me talk around SSM, we talk about kind of the funnel is, you talk about, you get your, this is kind of there's kind of the circles that Doug Field used to draw out of like crowd, committed, core. And so, for those of you who don't know, like the crowd is kind of the kids who show up on Wednesday night. The committed, those are in small groups, and those cores are those they're your Peter, James, and John out of your 12. If you're thinking that way. But a lot of times what happens, we're trying to create this funnel, but like you get all these kids in the crowd, and then like the next piece of your funnel is supposed to be into the committed, which is your loco groups, your small groups. But often that funnel's like over here because there's like, I'm here at the crowd, but now I got to figure out how to coordinate a ride, and how I got to figure out another night of the week. And now I got to figure out how to get mom bought in that this is actually important. Like, why are you're already going to church on Sunday and Wednesday. Now I got to take you on a Tuesday night group. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. I'm saying it's a thing. And so like, what do you feel like are some of the things that are keeping kids from jumping into loco groups? Like, what are some of those barriers, if you will?
Yeah, I think a few of the pieces, the marketing in the past has not been great. So it's been a little more word of mouth. It's been leaders picking out students of their small groups, which are normal groups that meet on a Wednesday night, saying like, hey, I want you in. And maybe it wasn't exposed to everybody. I feel like we've talked about it from the stage multiple times, but we all know that when you're dealing with students, sometimes communicating to a crowd, it's not always going to translate well. So that's definitely a gap.
Okay, what do you feel like are some of the barriers keeping kids from point A to point B? If we're trying to move them from our crowd to our committed, which is loco, what are some of those things that are keeping us?
Yeah. Okay. So I think the other thing might be just the commitment of it, of just hearing, I got to do another thing. And the kids that want more of Jesus, that want to get in the word, this is a perfect opportunity for them. I think a lot of those take advantage of it.
Let me ask you this. Have you ever talked to a kid who doesn't go to loco groups and and just ask them like, why? Like, have you ever, or maybe even just have like, what would their excuse be? Because like we're thinking from a leadership level, we got to get the vision out there. We got to get to love Jesus and stir up that passion and affection for him, so that way they want to commit. But like even just some of like the technical things, like why won't students do it?
Yeah. And what I hear a lot is I'm committed to this sport or to that activity or this extracurricular. So there's a lot of course, we know that we're competing with other things. These kids are filling up their schedules, filling up their calendars, and it's crazy. So what we're asking them to do is either commit to another thing or instead of
we really, I'll speak from experience here because, I don't know your context, and there's 1,000 different variables that go into this. One of the things that we did is because we kind of had groups set up when I was in my first ministry assignment. We had groups set up where they were meeting on other nights of the week. They had the midweek gathering, and then they were finding another night of the week. But what we found is that we were a high small groups driven adult culture as well. So is your church like that? Okay, so you have a lot of like adults meeting in homes and multiple nights of the week. So what we were finding is, and we were like that, which I think is it's the way it should be, right? Like it's very healthy. What we were finding is that like basically we were asking, up until junior year, you can't drive. So we were asking kids to get a ride from mom and dad to come to church on Sunday, church on Wednesday, to their adult small group on Tuesday, and to the low-crow group on Thursday, or what we would call just our FCS groups, our small groups. And so what we were finding is that the biggest barrier wasn't spiritual commitment. The biggest barrier wasn't sports. The biggest barrier was the logistics of getting there. And so, and I think one, identifying what those things are. It may not change your strategy at all. And I think that's where marketing comes in.
Right.
So marketing is overcoming people's objections in their brains before they ever think them. So when you're marketing your loco groups to think, okay, all right, we know that the biggest barriers that we can help, you can't make a dead person live. Only Jesus can do that. But what we would then change our marketing strategy to say, all right, middle school's just not hidden. And it's not just middle school's not hidden, because I'm going to survey the data and see where the gaps are. So I say, all right, let's say 8th grade girls aren't working. Okay. Why? All right. So my marketing strategy now becomes, how do I overcome the 8th grade girls' objections? But it's not just 8th grade girls. I'm looking at all the 8th grade girls, or I'm looking at all the girls in the ministry and thinking, okay, which group of humans don't have parents who are willing to give their kids another ride? So now I'm changing my marketing strategy as well to kind of figure out those objections. So I just think if you could zero in just a little bit more on the data and figure out who we're missing, what those people's objections are, and then that really impacts your marketing strategy. It may not change what you're doing. You may not move them on Wednesday nights or change the nights of the week. It just might change how you talk about them. So does that make sense at all?
Right. Yeah. And I think my first thought would be, okay, maybe I need to actually market to the parents a little more. Of maybe in our parent newsletter, that's where we're not just saying, hey, co-group startup and here's what they are, but it's maybe just list, even just the importance of here's why we do this, here's the vision behind it, here's the heart behind it.
And I think just figuring out too, like even, because gosh, getting parents on your team is everything. Like that's just, that you've been doing this for 7 years. Once you get so much more momentum when those parents are behind it. But even just meeting with them and just hearing, okay, get lunch. Okay, your kids aren't in loco, and this is not any hit behind it. But just tell me why. I just want to know. Have you ever thought about doing like a parent survey? Do you guys ever do those? It's great.
We're working on that this year. That's going to be for our parents that are already in the ministry. So we're going to do a parent night on November 1st. Parents are going to show up with their kids. We'll have a section for them to where they're not a distraction to their kids. They're in the back of the room, but we want them to see what we're doing with their kids.
That's great. So think about this too. Think about doing a targeted surveys, because again, marketing your small groups or marketing whatever you're doing is all about understanding who the person you're marketing to is. It's all about creating what you would call a customer avatar. A customer avatar is basically where you're just creating this model of the person you're communicating to and understanding their hopes, their dreams, their desires, and then trying to literally list out build a person of what they're like. And so I would think about doing this. Think about if you have that parent night, and think about sending that survey home to all the parents in your ministry that you have data for. But then think about sending 2 surveys. Think about sending a survey to the parents of the kids who are members of your church versus the parents of the kids who are not members of the church. Same questions, but when you pull the data, this is what the non-members are thinking, and this is what the members are thinking. And that might give you some more feedback on how to communicate to these kids. Because you might find out that the 1/3 of your ministry who are in there, they're all from your church. And you might figure out now that you're marketing to the wrong crew. Data just gives us so many pathways. So think about setting up in SurveyMonkey 2 separate surveys that look the same from the user experience, but the user interface, the UI on the back end for you, exactly who we're talking to now. And just mining all that data and then crafting a message around it. I don't know if that makes sense at all. It makes sense in my head. We do a question too on the first time guest forms, or we did a question on the first time guest forms when they come in of we'll ask, where does your parent attend church? Because for me, that gives me so much data. And now I can even communicate to different kids and different parents in different ways. Because for me, the win is not the parent who goes to another church and their kid comes. Like I'm like, go to your own freaking church. Like like your parent can come to our church, start tithing and being involved there, but don't use us as your babysitters. I love that the kid's there, but I want the whole family there. But I'm really trying to figure out those kids who their parent goes nowhere, and accessing that data on the front end allows us to communicate differently. So talk to me about your group's marketing strategy. So what's in your head currently?
Yeah. And that's the issue, is a lack of strategy.
Yeah.
And we're very strategic in a lot of things that we do. This is one that we're
that
still
ministry,
figuring out.
right?
So
Nobody like
as
use
of
your
right
marketing
now,
seminary class.
at our leader vision night. Right. Honestly,
Yeah.
in the middle of everything else that we're doing, and co-groups are just a facet of what we do. We've got, really a four-prong approach, and that includes events, our youth group, what else, and our outreach as well, included into co-groups. So for marketing for co-groups, right now, we're obviously targeting the kids that are already in it, talking to their parents, saying, hey, we'd love for you to be a part of it again, going through our small group leaders and trying to get them on board first, saying like, hey, this is the vision of our ministry. We're not here to babysit. We're not here to chaperone. We're here to disciple. So who's in? I know this is extra from Wednesday night, but this is what we're about. This is what we're in for. So we try to get our leaders on board. So at Leader Vision Night, that's when we're going to cast that vision really hard and really push them into volunteering to be a co-group leader, aside from already being a small group leader. From there, right now, all we have planned is stage announcements, and I want to build a video with testimonies of those who have gone through it before. That plus a few Instagram posts, and that's the strategy. Oh, and I think we're putting that in our parent newsletter.
For sure. And that's, I mean, that, you said we haven't thought through the strat. Well, that's I feel like it can kind of be like, oh, we haven't thought about that yet. But it's like, no, we're thinking about a lot of important things, and but I would encourage you just to think about, have you ever read Building a Story Brand? Okay. So, Don Miller's Building a Story Brand. I like read everything Don Miller writes. And he is one of my, not theologically, but from I'm not a big Blue Like Jazz fan, but I am a big fan of all of his marketing content. And one of the things that he talks about is just figuring out the problem that the students are facing first. And what we talk about is an internal problem, an external problem, and a philosophical problem. So an internal problem is this is how you feel. An external problem is like this is what's happening in your world, and the philosophical problem is here's why it's just what he says just plain wrong that you're experiencing this. And so for me, I'm thinking, all right, so I'm going back, I'm gathering my data. Step one is I'm gathering data. So I'm looking at the big data from the numbers. Step two is I'm gathering data through surveys, and I'm gathering data through conversations. And then I'm figuring out who's there. And then step two is I'm trying to figure out, okay, what are the problems they're currently facing, and how does being in a loco group help solve that? Now, you might, a lot of people are like, oh, that's felt needs. Well, yeah, it is. Like it's evangelism. Evangelism is a felt need. I think we kind of give felt needs preaching, like especially in like seminary worlds, it kind of gets a bad rap. But I mean, you're lost without hope. That's a felt need. You don't know where to turn. That's a felt need. And I think it's really easy for us as pastors to be like, the reason you're not in small group is because you're not committed to Jesus enough. And I think a lot of times that might be a root issue, but the reason they're not in small group is because, well, they're anxious. And that's there's sin wrapped in that. And I don't want to get into that conversation around anxiety specifically, but you are ultimately seeing that the problem that you're getting solved is actually being solved by something in your mind, at least, other than church and other than Jesus. And we know that's going to leave them lost without hope. And just thinking through, how do we solve the problems? How do we have a communication strategy to middle schoolers about loco groups that is all directed towards the internal, the external, and the philosophical problems that they're facing. And then how do we talk to those groups differently? And just to even know, like, where are they at on the spectrum? Like, where are they at on, like, are they really lost and they don't know anything about God? And so we're going to have to talk to those kids completely differently. I think data helps drive a lot of those decisions, but then also just crafting that message through the lens of a problem. And so let's go down that path for the last little bit of time here. What do you feel like? What problem does a small group solve? Like, let's just kind of, because everybody in ministry is trying to get more kids in small groups. What do we feel like?
Yeah.
What do we feel like are some of the problems that they're facing on a daily basis that are like real world problems, not theological problems that only you and I as pastors know that they're facing, but like, what is that felt need that they're facing in their ministry? What do you think? What do your kids think?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is just who's going through what I'm going through. Who can I identify with? And I don't think they'd ever say it in that language, because I think what we're trying to help them do through these groups, and really in a lot of what we do, is articulate their faith, is put words to it, is define it, is wherever they're at, whether that's they're really strong in their faith, they're going to articulate it one way. If they're still struggling, still kind of early on in their journey,
that's one. So who's going through what I'm going through?
Group,
okay. What do you think? Let me throw this out there. What do you think? Because I feel like most people, and you may be the exception to this, most student ministry pastors I know struggle to reach high school dude athletes. Okay, making a real impact. You may be doing that. I always struggled in that area. What do we feel like the influential high school athlete guy? What's their felt need that they're struggling with? No right or wrong answers. I'm just literally playing this thing out here.
Yeah. No, I think there's that desire to be known, and I think especially for that person of influence, they're probably going to be seeking that out in one way or another. And man, if we can teach them that they're known by God, known and loved by Him first, then probably going to help them out in a lot of ways. And I think in a small group specifically, man, being known by a few.
Okay, so you got who's going what I'm going through, being known, and then I think even just for like the popular kid, and I know that we could go down each demographic is different, but like I just feel like high schoolers have such more of a pressure on them today to perform and to get into the right schools and to get all the scholarships than they ever did.
Yeah.
And like a place where like Loco can be a place where you can grow in your faith without pressure. Like nobody's going to be staring over your shoulder, and you're going to actually be able to be yourself. Like for once, you get to be you, not your social media profile.
Yeah.
So you just outlined 3 different things there. Yeah. Dude, that's your marketing strategy. Those are, sure, there's the logistical challenges to overcome, like driving and things like that. But I feel like if you take those 3 bullet points, you've now can have a tailored social media stage announcement campaign that you now can begin to speak to those people. And once you know who they are and what they're going through, you now have a marketing strategy for your Loco groups that gives you a really tailored message to be able to overcome problems. Because once they see that this is not something that the church wants from me, but it's actually something that God wants forming in their life, then they're naturally, students think about themselves. We don't have to teach them to think about themselves. They want to solve their own problems. And when they see that we actually have a solution to it, they're naturally going to start connecting their problem with your solution. And that's what marketing is. It's you have a problem, and I want to make it to where we're the solution. And the bridge between those things is very tight. It's not a long bridge. And so I don't know if that's helpful at all, man. Any thoughts you have on that as we come to a close here?
Yeah, no, I'm excited already in my mind. I'm like, okay, I know who on my team needs to go listen to this podcast once it's out, and they need to start working on this strategy because this is really helpful. And I think, man, I think there's areas that as a youth pastor, you have to be a generalist in. You have to know how to do a lot of different things. Got to be a Swiss Army knife. Yeah. This is one of those areas that I am not great in. So this is really beneficial for me. This was helpful. It's helped me think through it in a new lens. I've read the Donald Miller Story Brand book.
Yeah.
I think you just kind of repurposed it for me
Yeah,
for
that's
this
great.
specific
Well,
issue.
I appreciate
That's
those
helpful, man.
words,
That's good.
and that's kind of the thing is for everybody out there listening is that we help through simple strategies, scalable systems. Like we didn't get into like anything like mind blowing here. It's just like it's simple stuff, but it just kind of if you were trained in theology, you were probably trained in ministry, ministry philosophy, but like creating target audiences,
Yeah.
like that's just a practical side of things that a lot of us we get caught in the daily grind of ministry. And so most people don't have a strategy for that. And probably if you're listening to this, you may not have a strategy for that either, which is where we get to come alongside and we can help coach you. So one of the great things that we do is a 1 hour free strategy session, a coaching session, where we're not going to sit there and upsell you to do stuff with us. We're just going to help you think through a strategy. And if you want to work with us, great. We're going to be able to provide you a ton of value. But if not, we've helped you. So if you're interested in that, go to simplystrategicministry.com/coaching and get a free strategy session with myself or our other coach, Patrick, or one of our team members. We would love to have you on as well. We'd also love to have you on the podcast. If you want to do your free coaching session on the podcast, let's just hit record and let's go. But some takeaways from today is if you don't know why something isn't working, go to the data first. Look at where the holes are happening. Second is get survey information and use A/B testing. A/B testing is when you send one survey to a set of people, you send another survey to another set of people, and you compare those data to help give you more data on who you're talking to. And then number 3 is create a custom message based upon the internal, external, and philosophical problems that they are facing, because when what you offer is going to solve their problem, you're not going to have to spend a lot of time trying to get them to do it. Why? Because students think about themselves. We all want to solve our problems. We're all thinking about how to move forward and make our lives better and how to grow closer in our faith and spirituality and how to grow closer to Jesus. And so I hope you'll start there and grow your ministry through simple strategies and scalable systems. Thank you, Anthony, for being on the podcast. If Anthony, where can you have a podcast? Tell people about how they can follow along and connect with you.
Yeah, easiest place is Instagram. It's my name, Anthony Lucarini, and the podcast that I host is the Deep Work Podcast. I bring guests on, and honestly, the heart behind that is I've gotten some really cool conversations that I don't want to keep to myself. So you can go listen to those.
Heck yeah. Well, thank you guys for listening. Be sure and follow along with us. Go ahead and if you haven't already subscribed to our newsletter, and if you're not already following this podcast, go ahead and do that. And we thank you so much for listening.